Welcome to the Books, Beards, Booze podcast, where we talk books, drink booze, and have beards.
All right. As always, I'm Bob who Tells by Bob.
I'm the Ask the Podcast, Derek.
And creative consultant Tanya still not with us because we record all the week's episodes on the same day, and she couldn't be here on recording day. So you're stuck with classic lineup.
Classic
Lineup. You could confuse it with shittier lineup.
And you'd be accurate.
You'd be right.
But that's why we suggest Detling bourbon.
Yeah, which is what we're sipping on.
Which is what we're drinking, because if you get drunk enough, you won't notice that we're shit.
I'm getting a decent little... It's warming my chest.
The subcockles of your heart.
Yeah, so we're drinking through missing her. So
good vibes.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain. Time to die. That is the classic line by Rutger Hauer playing Roy Batty, the cyborg that Harrison Ford murks in Blade Runner.
Oh.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines in a movie ever. It's rare for me to cry over a movie that doesn't involve a dog dying. And I didn't cry over this, but it's such a it's an emotional line and ad-libbed, more or less. Like they gave him a line and he just basically completely rewrote it and made it amazing. This is also, you see a lot of references to the Tannhauser Gate. That's where that comes from. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. There was no Tannhauser Gate in the script or anything like that. He just kind of came up with it. They think he may have been trying to reference Wagner. There's Tannhauser is a character in a Wagner opera, I think, or something like that. But yeah, but now you see that crop up in sci-fi all the time, like the Tannhauser Gate.
So maybe we should tell them what this episode's about.
Well, so why did I quote this, my favorite line from one of my favorite movies of all time?
Tell me, Bob.
Because this is our Cyberpunk episode.
I am so excited for this.
Okay, so if you haven't read the short reads this month...
I haven't.
There are two Cyberpunk stories.
Ooh.
There's Cyberpunk short stories. And go to our website, and you can find the links. They're free to read. Just go to the short reads tab, look for June. There's two stories there. Click them, read them. And they're both Cyberpunk. But as I got to thinking about it, I was like, you know what? A lot of people probably don't know Cyberpunk or know much about it. And I thought it might be good just to have a kind of informative episode, kind of like about the history of Cyberpunk, just talking Cyberpunk, letting people know what they're getting into. So, what is Cyberpunk?
I don't know.
Okay.
That was I have a rough shape of the genre in my head, but I don't know if it's entirely accurate or if I've added or subtracted elements that aren't necessarily.
I will sum it up in one line. Cyberpunk is low life, high tech.
Okay.
So what do you think? When you think Cyberpunk, what kind of comes to mind for you?
The first thing is probably Shadowrun.
Okay, Shadowrun is Cyberpunk, very much Cyberpunk, but it's Shadowrun, for those who know, is a role-playing system. It's kind of like D&D, but Shadowrun mixes fantasy. And there's magic, there's orcs, there's trolls.
Oh, is there really?
Yeah. Shadowrun, the cool thing that they did was basically it's very stereotypical Cyberpunk. It's at the megacorp.
We need to do some Shadowrun.
And so in the storyline of Shadowrun, like in the year I forget, like we'll just say 2000, there was all of a sudden there was this like wave of mutation that just all these kids were born, and dwarves and elves. And then, like, a couple years later, another wave of mutation hit, and all these kids were born as orcs and trolls.
That's super weird.
And there's dragon, there's magic. Like, basically, it's like, I think it was like when the Mayan calendar rolled over, like that, it started the 5th age or something like that, and magic returned to the world. So it mixes cyberpunk leanings with magic. Woo! So you get street samurai with street shaman. So that's Shadowrun. So Shadowrun is, if you stripped all the magic out, Shadowrun is stereotypical cyberpunk.
Okay.
So,
Well, my thing was just like that's what I think of, or I think of the things I probably have the most familiarity with are probably the anime that come out of it.
okay, yeah, and there are a ton. We'll get into that. So, all right. So what is cyberpunk? A little more in depth, kind of the elements. So Lawrence Pearson, who's he? I don't know, but he attempted to define the content and ethos of the cyberpunk literary movement, stating, "Classic cyberpunk characters were marginalized, alienated loners who lived on the edge of society in generally dystopic futures where daily life was impacted by rapid technological change, an ubiquitous datasphere of computerized information, and invasive modification of the human body." That's a really complicated way of saying there's always some form of like internet, body modifications are common, and it kind of focuses on low-life outsider types. There's a few kind of common themes. One of the common themes is Japan. So William Gibson is kind of like one of the main guys of cyberpunk. He was quoted. He was asked about the influence of Japan on the genre, and his quote was, "Modern Japan simply was cyberpunk." If you look at cyberpunk, the aesthetics of it all is based on like the high tech areas of like Tokyo, like all the neon lights and stuff like that. Like the visual setting of cyberpunk is these really technologically advanced cities. Yeah, and at the time that was Japan. So when Ridley Scott, when he was doing Blade Runner, he said the landscape of cyberpunk Los Angeles was Hong Kong on a very bad day. That's what he was going for. So, but yeah, so like at the time, like when the 80s is when cyberpunk starts to come out, and Japan was just so cutting edge in a lot of ways, and that's where they were drawing a lot of these influences from. The next kind of deal is the protagonists. So a common theme here is that the protagonists are like manipulated into the story kind of deal. Like they very rarely are they tearing off to go be the hero. It's usually they are blackmailed or bribed or something, manipulated in some way to be the protagonist of this story.
Right.
So you've read Neuromancer.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of the biggest problems I had with the story, was that the main character, for the most part, was kind of just along for the ride.
Yeah, because he was kind of forced into this, and he didn't want to be there. Like they offered him what he really wanted.
Yeah. And then gave it to him. But after he got it, he was kind of invested, but like he was never the driving force of the story ever.
No. And it's because he didn't even get into the story on his own. You know, he was brought in, but that's common in cyberpunk. There's like no one's tearing off to be the hero. That ain't these kind of stories.
My thing is, you don't necessarily have to be the hero, but you have to have something that you're gunning towards.
Yeah, and he got what he wanted.
He got what he wanted. Fucking immediately. Well, not immediately, but pretty early on in the book.
So, and so it's common that even though they tend to always see the mission through kind of deal, it's pretty common that they, at the end of the story, they're not really any farther ahead than they were at the start. Yeah, like that's a common thing. Like they're brought in, they do the thing, and it just kind of ends. You know, but so there's a lot of anti-heroes are common, like criminals, outcasts, dissenters, misfits, and so the emphasis on the misfits is where you get the punk element of cyberpunk. Like the focus on like the low lifes and whatnot. So cyberpunk writers tend to use the elements from hard-boiled detective fiction, like film noir and postmodernist prose to describe an often nihilistic underground side of an electronic society. So I'll get more into it, but like a lot of cyberpunk is a response to the sci-fi that was coming out. Right. And a lot of sci-fi that's coming out was very utopian. Optimistic. And they were like, no, it ain't that. Another trope of it is that much of the action takes place online. which you could, in a way, is almost analogous to like dream stuff in other stories. But the action takes place online in a virtual setting, and that's pretty common. And there's often like, because of the technology, there's a physical implant a lot of times that allows people to jack into the,
which goes into the body modification.
Exactly. And the last kind of trope of it are these giant multinational corporations, like the idea that corporations become more powerful than the governments and are governments unto themselves, and have basically they've replaced governments as the center of political, economic, and military power. Like these corporations typically have their own militaries and shit like that. So that's kind of, if you're like, what am I going to read with some cyberpunk? That's probably what you're going to read. You're going to probably read some guy gets manipulated by a megacore to go rob another megacore, and shenanigans ensue to some degree or another. Fairly common tropes. So where does it come from? Where do we get this? So the origins of cyberpunk come in the new wave science fiction movement. So like, think of like your Asimovs and your Bradburys and whatnot. Like, so much of what they were writing was like, even like in the pulpy stuff, it was like, oh, I'm going and exploring this alien planet and I've encountered aliens. Ooh. These guys were like, fuck that. They're like, they wanted to focus on sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically. Like, how is technology affecting us? How is like drug and free sex culture affecting us? So like, a lot of these guys, like, it's the new wave is in like the 60s and 70s, and these guys are coming out of that. So you got guys like William Gibson, Harlan Ellison, Roger Zelazny, J.G. Ballard, Philip Jose Farmer. So they're all like looking at like the 60s and 70s, a crazy time, man. Free sex, free love, and they're like, and drugs, and like, well, how does that affect us and our sci-fi? And that's what they wanted to write about, and so they did, and that's where we start getting sci-fi. So I have this awesome quote.
Well, that's where we get cyberpunk sci-fi.
That's what. My bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for clarity.
So, this quote concerns Asimov, and like kind of showing the change that came about. It's like, so the quote, and I'm going to surprise you with who the quote is by at the end, because I want to see Derek's face. But all right, so the novel "The Gods Themselves" is noteworthy for how it both shows that Asimov was indeed the same writer in the 70s that he had been in the 50s, and that he nonetheless had been affected by the new wave, even if he was never a part of it. His depiction of an alien menage a trois, complete with homoerotic scenes between the two males, marks an interesting departure from his earlier fiction, in which sex of any sort was conspicuously absent. Also, there is some minor experimentation with the structure. So, kind of showing like Asimov, like it was.
I have that book.
Yeah. So, who that quote is by?
Brandon Sanderson.
Dr. Darren Harris Fane.
Oh, hey!
Who is Derek's professor in college.
My favorite professor.
Yeah. I was doing research on this, and I was like, they're like, quote here, quote here, quote here. I was like, wait a minute. Dr. Harris Fane. Oh my God. So I was like, oh, I had to put that in here. Even though it wasn't like exactly essential to this thing, I had to put that in there.
No, it was absolutely essential. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, neat. Dr. Harris Fane taught a bunch of stuff about, like, he did the class on the Watchmen, right?
Yeah, he taught a class that I took on graphic novels, which had Watchmen in it.
Yeah. And Mouse too, right?
And Mouse. That was a fascinating class. And then he also taught a class on contemporary American novels. And I took basically, he was the professor that I was working night shifts, and if he had a class that would screw up my schedule, I would still take that class. Yeah. Because then I would just get up and have to be tired for work because I wanted to take his classes.
Yeah. And I met the guy. He's a cool dude. So where do we get the name? So there's a short story written by Bruce Bethke named Cyberpunk. It came out in 1983. Mm-hmm. And it was published in Amazing Stories. And so Gardner Doge, I don't know how to say his last name, but he's an editor, and like if you ever see a anthology edited by him, jump on it. Him and George R. R. Martin have done a bunch of editing together. Any of those books, jump on them. They're great. But anyway, so Bethke said he made up 2 lists of words. One list was technology, and one was for troublemakers. And he just sat there and combined them. That was the best one. Yeah, and combined them until he got one he was happy with. And like so, then Gardner Dojoy, who was the editor of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine, he started using that word in his editorials, and the word just
kind of stuck.
Yeah. So that's the history of cyberpunk. That's what cyberpunk is. So let's talk a little bit about like if you want to consume some cyberpunk. So cyberpunk starts out very much as a literary enterprise, but it very quickly goes beyond the literature. Mm-hmm. But so the best book examples of it, Neuromancer, which Derek and I have read, came out in 1984. It has 2 sequels, Count Zero and Mona Lisa Overdrive, which I just love the title of. And they're 3 standalone novels that share characters, kind of deal.
Yeah.
But they are functionally standalone stories. So this next book was written by Philip K. Dick in 1968. So it precedes Cyberpunk, but it's kind of considered
has a lot of the elements.
It's considered like the grandfather of Cyberpunk. Mm-hmm. But it's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is what becomes Blade Runner.
Really?
Yeah, that's Blade Runner is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
Okay,
a major plot of the book that got removed from the movie is there's a lot more focus on the ecological harm that we've done to the planet, and there's this culture of like owning a real live animal is a prestige thing because we've killed off so many animals. So Decker, the bounty hunter, he owns an electric sheep. He can't afford a real sheep, so he has an electric one, and that's kind of where the title comes from. So I would say that like the core of cyberpunk kind of ends in the early 90s. Like it's mostly an 80s phenomena, like from the book side of things. And I would say it kind of ends with Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, which is kind of viewed as satire of cyberpunk. So it's gotten to the point where like cyberpunk is established enough that it's
has detractors.
It's getting satirized. Cyberpunk has always had some detractors. Like basically, if you read any cyberpunk from like the 80s, it's white dudes, and that's it. Like I'm not talking about the authors, which the authors were pretty much all white dudes, but like there's very little in the way of women outside of like Molly, the street samurai. Like it's. So there are detractors like, well, it was really just white guys writing about white guys. And if you think how varied and bizarre cyberpunk culture is, you think that there would be more representation. So that has been a critique. I think the cyberpunk that we're seeing now has eliminated that. Like one of the stories that we're reading, it brings in some of the what I think are logical conclusions of what a cyberpunk sexual culture would be like.
You're really selling me on these short stories, Bob.
Yeah, no, it's weird, but no, but so like there have always been some detractors, and also like it's kind of like it's so just anytime you have a genre that's a reaction to another genre, basically people are gonna hate. Yeah.
Well, my thing is like I have problems with cyberpunk, but I'm also still there are aspects of it that I find very interesting, but there's also aspects about it that I think kind of ruin it for me. So I'm curious as to what it would be like if I were to. Well, for me,
those. If you think about a megacore, is really just a noble house under a different paint scheme.
Oh, trust me,
so that's kind of where that's where a lot of my love of it comes. So Neil Stephenson, a lot of his books, he's like a kind of a futurist writer at times. So like. There are people that think he may have created Bitcoin. If he did not create Bitcoin, he definitely was writing about Bitcoin-like stuff before Bitcoin was Bitcoin. So he's a very ahead of his time kind of author. But then, so Transmetropolitan is an amazing graphic novel series. Love it. Brandon Baxter Ryan and me have both read it in its entirety. It's basically Hunter S. Thompson in a cyberpunk setting. It's great.
Yeah.
And then
not a Hunter S. Thompson fan.
Just like the Gonzo reporter, like the main character is a reporter, this like very freelance reporter, like speaking truth to power kind of guy in a cyberpunk setting.
That seems like that'd get you dead.
Yeah, yeah, it very much would.
Okay.
And so then when we're talking about the best book examples, I mean, how can we not talk about Ready Player One?
I'm so. You say that, but you okay. So
Ready Player One is loosely considered cyberpunk.
I think it fits the theme. If
it does.
Doesn't
the tone is what doesn't fit, but structurally it is fundamental. It's a cyberpunk setting, but the tone is a little more
optimistic.
Optimistic than your typical cyberpunk.
See, that's my thing. Is I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, cyberpunk is like real grim.
And that's
for the
not
most part.
That's not my jam. But no, see, I knew this episode was coming, so I also something I was going to bring up later that I'll go ahead and mention now is like I'm super interested in cyberpunk right now. Like I'm kind of past, like I'm not feeling the fantasy right now. I'm going in on
you've been wanting to do sci-fi.
Yeah, so like I'm going in. So I've been doing some looking around trying to figure out what I'm going to read after what I'm reading currently. And I was like, oh, best cyberpunk books, and fucking Ready Player One, and I just rage shut out the window and don't remember anything else on the list anymore because I had that.
So obviously you've already read Neuromancer, which is kind of, it's the quintessential.
Yeah.
But check out Altered Carbon.
Yeah, I started watching the show, and I imagine the show.
The show is different.
A lot different, yeah.
Yeah.
But the show is that like
in that whole that world, basically you can upload your consciousness and download it into different bodies.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the theme behind it.
I never finished it, but it was really fun. I enjoyed what I watched of it.
That actually Altered Carbon was on my best examples of like media representations.
Okay.
So Blade Runner, obviously.
I need to watch that again because I only watched.
Well, I need to see the new one, Blade Runner 2047. I need to watch that. The Matrix films.
Yep.
Or Cyberpunk. Total Recall.
I think I've seen
Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Chick with 3 boobs.
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, that's all you need to know.
Yeah, I know. I knew both those two things, but I haven't seen it.
Judge Dredd.
Seen it.
And I guess they made a sequel or something.
They made a new Dredd, but I haven't seen that one. I started watching it.
I haven't seen it either.
I started watching it, and I thought in the first 5 minutes it looked awful, but then everyone else is like, "It's amazing!" I'm like, okay, well, clearly I missed something, and I was rather intoxicated.
Yeah. So. So one thing that Judge Dredd has that's I'm kind of into the Judge Dredd. Yeah. Well, so the three Gibson books, Neuromancer, Count Zero, and Mona Lisa Overdrive, that's what's known as his Sprawl trilogy.
Right.
So the Sprawl is basically, and this is kind of becoming a real thing, the Sprawl is the Baltimore, Atlanta megaplex,
yeah.
Something like that. The Mega Authority, I think. The acronym is BAMA. But it's basically from Baltimore to Atlanta.
No, it's the Baltimore... Atlanta metropolitan area.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, is one massive city at this point. But if you look, just look up there is basically a mega city forming now, in the middle of the East Coast, just as these major cities are growing closer and closer together. It's forming. It's coming, probably. If some bitch and tidal wave don't destroy us about the ocean. No, so Judge Dredd has that, the megaplex kind of deal. So some other really good... Oh, do
they have Judge Dredd books?
Yeah. Oh, it's a comic book,
I know it was a comic book, but I didn't know if it was a book.
Oh, novels? I don't know. I know it was a fuck ton of comics. I read the wiki on a lot of it.
I've never read a Judge Dredd comic. I know I've seen...
It takes some twists and turns from what I've read. Yeah. But then Altered Carbon, which we mentioned, and Love, Death, Robots has some good
Seems
episodes.
a little bit, but
it's got some good episodes. I recommend the Zima Blue episode.
is that the one I watched?
Is that the one about the pool tiles?
No.
Then
I watched the one about the three
robots. Yeah, that was great. Yeah. All right. So some other really good examples: Shadowrun, which we talked about. Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out. Everyone is super hyped for that.
Did you see the trailer?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Everyone's super hyped. Me and Ryan routinely just sit on the internet and just slowly fap to thoughts of that book. And then Deus Ex, which is a series, super cyberpunk series, and it's out there. Go check it out.
I want to be included on these cyberpunk conversations, Bob.
Well, so why am I on a big cyberpunk kick?
Because you have been for years anyway.
Because I have been for years. And part of that, though, is I developed a cyberpunk alternate history setting. And me and brand ambassador Ryan are working on it. We're writing short stories. I've written 2. He's written 1. He's written 1 that has gotten away from him. It started.
Ain't that how that happens?
You read the one. All right, so he took that and finessed it, and it was already really good. And he took it and finessed it. It's like, oh wow, man, this is, fuck yeah. And then he just kept adding to it.
Oh no,
he like kept adding to it, and
there for this.
And it was like he was like, I just don't. He was messaging me the other day. He's like, man, I just don't know. Like, I don't really know where I'm going with the story at this point. And I was like, I think because what you've done is you have added to this to a point that you really have 2 stories. Like, break that first part off that was just a standalone story, leave it a standalone story, and all
start
this
a novel from that
other stuff that you're coming up with, like, that's a separate idea. Like, they're great ideas, but you're kind of shoehorning them together. Like, make them 2 separate ideas. I think you're going to be in good shape. So he's working on that. So kind of not to just like sell our idea out there to the world, but the fun thing that we're playing around with is basically the idea that, so it's called the Twin Suns setting. It's basically the British Empire more or less stays intact, and the Empire of Japan forms as it was setting out to do in World War II, and they become rivals. So instead of like a Russia-U.S. Cold War, it's Japan-Britain. Well, we got to thinking about it, because this is not the order in which the ideas came, but how the ideas now have formed. Because they're both islands, they're both a lot more sensitive to global warming. And so this is a cyberpunk setting that has really taken saving the environment to heart, but at the expense of people. So it's still this like dystopic place for people, but
the environment's great though.
But better. It's better.
I mean, yeah, you can't stop the climate change. You can only slow it down a bit.
So you get weird dynamics at play with that kind of deal. So we're having fun with it. Hopefully this time next year we'll have enough that we can start getting it edited and throw out there for the world to consume. But yeah, Derek, have any questions?
I have a lot of questions. Yeah. First of all, and this is the one that I originally jumped to, and I was thinking about it. I was like, is the Fifth Element cyberpunk?
Yes. It's considered cyberpunk, but here's where I don't think the whole movie is cyberpunk. The movie up until he leaves the planet is cyberpunk. Once he leaves the planet, it quits being cyberpunk at that point.
I don't think it is. I think it's more space opera.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see the argument. It's space opera in a cyberpunk setting. The Earth is super cyberpunk.
They just don't stay there very long.
They don't stay there very long, and they go out and about, and it's definitely more like, because cyberpunk is very rarely about saving the world, or saving any world, or saving much of anything. It's more about let's make some money and not die in the process. So yeah,
that was just something that I was.
Yeah, no, because it did crop up. That's why I actually didn't put it on the list, because it does crop up on lists of cyberpunk movies. But I just don't view the whole thing.
There's no body modification.
Or at least not really. No.
Yeah. Just.
I mean, that one guy has that. The bad guy has that thing on his head. But no, it's. Do you know how it took me a stupid, Like I'd seen that movie like probably like 8 times. This is my secret shame that I'm now announcing to the world. You know when the guy tries to rob him?
Yeah.
He's wearing that stupid hat. It took me watching that movie like 8 times to realize that the top of that hat was painted to look like the wall so he wouldn't show up on the camera. Yeah, my secret shame. Yeah, Derek's looking at me like I'm an idiot because I am.
I don't even.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
let's just move.
Yeah, moving on.
Another question.
Yeah.
And this is something that I heard that was considered cyberpunk that I'm not sure I agree with either, but I think it's a discussion to have.
Okay.
Cowboy Bebop.
Okay, it does crop up on the list. Because a lot of the city, it's got... So here's why. All right, so it's... The thing about most cyberpunk is it definitely takes place like on Earth.
Yeah.
In the near future for the most part kind of deal. I feel like Cowboy Bebop is if you took cyberpunk to its logical conclusion in the future.
Right.
Like it's got the detective noir feel of it. Tonally, it's very kind of cyberpunk. It's very mercenary.
Fairly nihilistic.
But it is in that space opera-y kind of setting.
Yeah.
So of the two, I would say Cowboy Bebop is more cyberpunk than Fifth Element.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just that it does have space opera elements to it. So
yeah, that was just one that I had never really considered, and I saw it on the list, and I was like,
we
shit,
didn't really talk about anime, but
yeah.
Cowboy, not Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in the Shell.
Well, that's what I had to discuss, which was basically the fact that the large majority of my experience with cyberpunk comes from anime, and that's mostly Akira and Ghost in the Shell.
Which Akira, very cyberpunk, and Ghost in the Shell is the most cyberpunk.
It is.
It's the most cyberpunk thing of all the things.
Yeah, I honestly think, like, when I think cyberpunk, I think Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say earlier. It's like, I think Shadowrun only because I'm actively talking to you, and you're pretty much the only person I've ever talked to about Shadowrun.
Yeah.
But it sounds super fucking awesome.
If the system was easier, it's a point-buy system. And point-buy systems, while great, are just so complicated for new people. And I would have to be DMing a system I've never run before. it'd be.
I can neither confirm nor deny. I've been reading about it because
I've got the 5th edition rulebook at my house right now.
I'm gonna need that.
Okay,
that's what I should run.
Yeah.
Anyways, but because we've got a group of people that can handle it.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. Well, I know Rachel's not real big on anything outside of D&D, but we can make it happen. Chris would be down.
Yeah. So, but Akira, right?
The biggest anime of all time, pretty much. Well, probably not like dollar-wise at this point.
Probably the most influential, though.
There we go.
It's came out in 1988, I think it was. And, like, I'm going to go ahead and just say this.
Yeah.
Because, so, if anybody has seen, if you haven't seen Akira and you're interested in cyberpunk,
you're fucking up.
Watch fucking Akira.
Yeah.
Like, it's...
Watch the Ghost in the Shell movie, and then for something more enjoyable, watch Standalone Complex, the show. Ghost in the Shell, the movie, is great. The theme, like, it's my favorite anime movie of all time, but it can be a bit... I can see why people wouldn't necessarily enjoy it as much. But the show is just fucking fun and great and awesome.
Yeah, I haven't gone too deep into... Anyways, but Akira... I'm going to have to get out notes that I actually kind of forgot to pull up.
Akira, I'm led to believe that his hips don't lie.
That is not accurate, Bob. How dare you?
He has very dishonest hips.
How dare you, sir?
That may be Shakira.
Yeah, you might have gotten that slightly inaccurate. Okay, but basically, if you've seen Akira, you know.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Akira, watch Akira, and when you're done, highly suggest watching. Go to YouTube and look up The Impact of Akira, the film that changed everything. It's by a YouTuber named Super Eyepatch Wolf. It's awesome. because it breaks down like the history of.
Because Akira like it was like the new style of anime kind of deal. Like,
it wasn't even the new style. It was coming out of the 80s, which was a golden era of anime, specifically because at that point
they were all under 26 episodes.
Anime had not become anime yet.
Okay,
like nowadays, anime has tropes and themes and things that people expect from it. Back then, it was a genre that did not. It was just like, we do animated things, and during a boom in financing, or like where they had just more money to funnel into it in Japan because of the economic boom.
Yeah,
they were just like, fuck it, let's just do this. And at this point, this is all explained in the video much better than I'm going to do it right now. They had people that had like 20 and 30 years of anime experience, because anime itself had started in the 60s in Japan, that were coming about at the same time as the people that were getting out of school for animation, that had been inspired by the works that they had started. So they had people that were seasoned as hell veterans, and people that were coming in with new ideas and the latest technology,
and
it just came together. And since there was no cat girls being a thing in anime, basically there was no things to pander to at this point.
Yeah,
because they didn't know what was going to define the genre.
I'll definitely say Akira ain't pandering to shit.
No. And so, like, to the point where they threw so much money into that movie, and like, it has higher, what is it? It's not basically frames per second.
Yeah, like frame rate.
Yeah, basically they put more picture, like, it's so incredibly, insanely detailed that it's higher production quality than Disney was doing at the time.
Oh, damn.
And shit like that, so that it's liquid smooth, and it's why it holds up to this day. But it's a fascinating watch. I would highly, highly suggest it, because it just lays out the whole history of like how it changed things, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But on the point of the actual story, that was probably the first thing that I watched that I knew was Cyberpunk.
Yeah. And like the whole like bike culture, like Japanese motorcycle culture, that has definitely become a part of Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
It's not like in every story, but it's a somewhat common
like,
trope now.
Genuinely, you say Cyberpunk to me, in my head I see the poster for Akira. That's what I see.
Yeah.
It's because, by the way, Kaneda's bike is like the coolest
Badass.
thing ever.
Badass. Yeah. Got any other questions for me? Because I'm clearly the cyberpunk expert of all experts.
Because, well, compared to me,
I've actually read
some
of it.
Here's another question that I had.
Yeah.
Is there anything about Cyberpunk you don't like?
I'll be honest, like, to a degree, the same thing that you don't like, just how nihilistic it is.
I hate
it. Because if you think about it, like, I don't like the first Mistborn trilogy because of how bleak it is.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, I mostly read short stories.
So it doesn't get to you.
It doesn't get to me. Like, that's the thing. Like, Mistborn, it was so bleak for so long. Like, I was just sunk into this world for so long. And the other thing is, like, it's a bleak... I guess part of the difference is, like, a dystopia I can deal with because life is cyclical. The dystopia will eventually go away. Something will come along to
make things better.
So even if the individual stories are hopeless, better days are coming. Mm-hmm. Mistborn,
there weren't.
Well, because you do get Mistborn trilogy 2, but
yeah,
or series 2, but fundamentally, life sucks. Yeah. Everything sucks. Yeah. There is no improvement.
So that's kind of what
that would be the main thing I just don't like.
Because see, here's the thing that the idea and aesthetic of this low life, high tech, fascinating.
Yeah.
But the only problem I have with it is that I don't think that the low life, high tech absolutely has to lend itself to people that have no driving force.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
And that's the thing that bothers me the most. So I'm trying. I want to.
You want to find Cyberpunk
where someone has a goal.
Okay,
that's pretty much it. Like,
yeah.
If someone has something that they're shooting for, even if I wrote down as we were discussing, it was like Cyberpunk. It's got a lot about low life and stuff like that. Well, people still want things. the rise of a criminal enterprise in the underworld would be something that I would
look at that Altered Carbon, because I think what that is, he is a detective. I think it's like a detective mystery series. It's like Nakashi Kovac is the detective or whatnot. That might
I know they changed it for the video, but the show was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna be honest, up until it got to one point where something happened, and I remember it threw me, and I was like, this is kind of not. Yeah. This is weird.
Not your wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't that. It was just like, I don't really like the direction this took.
Okay.
Like, you've had books where it just takes the direction, and you're like,
It's like, I'm not.
But up until that point, I was like, I love everything about this. There was living hotels.
Yeah.
And like that, as soon as you sign in, they're like, you now live here. We're going to protect you, and giant guns will come out of the ceiling and shoot anybody that's trying to fuck with you, kind of thing. Like, it's just fucking awesome.
Write a cyberpunk short story and with me and Ryan.
Well, that's what I was. That's why I said include me in the fucking thing.
Yeah, do it. Write a story
I'm super into it right now, especially since your world seems less nihilistic. I could probably fit in something where people
the world is like, I would say it's somewhat less dystopic to a degree. Like, we're not really focusing on the dystopia so much,
which is what I want.
But it's very much a class divide. Like there's very like the 1% is very like the gap between the 1% and the 99%.
That's one of the more interesting things to look at.
Is broader.
Yeah.
And so we'll do this. We'll do this.
Yeah, because I'm super into this right now.
Yeah.
Way more than any fantasy thing right now.
I don't want to tell my stories on air, but I'll tell you my new idea that I have that I'm going to start writing here soon.
Okay.
Yeah, you got any more questions before we wrap this puppy up?
Man, I got mostly it was just things like that, because I love the aesthetic. I like the idea. Like, I've read a couple books that I would say United States of Japan, I think is Cyberpunk.
A lot of Cyberpunk does have mechs.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Was that it has mechs in that.
Tokyo Police? What was that series? Tokyo Tank Police? Mega Tank Police?
I know what you're talking about, but I can't
watched
remember
that series, and it was Cyberpunk, but yeah.
There's a lot of Cyberpunk in anime.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. I need to still watch Serial Experiment Lane. Like, I still haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I need to see that.
I need to watch all of Ghost in the Shell.
I've never seen it. Ever.
I've seen the movie, and I've seen most of Standalone Complex.
I've seen like the first 3 episodes of it.
It's good stuff.
I know it's Fan Chris and Ohio Chris. It's both of their favorite anime ever. So
yeah, I think it might. Once I finish it, I think it'll be my favorite.
Yeah. And we started one of those anime we started watching back when we had the comic book club.
Yeah.
Psychopaths.
Yeah.
That's one that always comes up when I mention Cyberpunk or I'm looking up Cyberpunk, but I haven't watched it, so I don't know. But yeah.
All right. Well, I think we'll kind of wrap up there, and I feel like there's enough meat on this bone that in the future, especially once you've written some, me, you, brand ambassador Ryan, we'll get together and we'll do an episode,
and we'll read more of it when I've read more of it, because that's kind of
that's the thing. I need to read more as well. Like, I've read Neuromancer, I've read Burning Chrome, I've read short stories and stuff like that. Because like we also have not touched on any of the stuff that comes out of Cyberpunk, steampunk, biopunk, dieselpunk, all the punks originate out of Cyberpunk.
Can we talk very briefly, and we'll I was on fucking Audible looking for Cyberpunk books. They don't have a Cyberpunk subgroup.
Yeah.
But you know what they do have? Steampunk.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, the fuck is this shit?
Well, I'll say this. There's probably a lot more steampunk. There's a lot more steampunk getting written right now, I bet you.
Steampunk also has an aesthetic I like, but just mentally the images I see in my head for...
and like we haven't even touched
my love of Japan.
We haven't touched on music at all, like cyberpunk music.
Oh, by the way, the fucking music in Akira.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So there's a lot of meat left on this bone. We'll do another episode because this one's kind of run a little longer than we normally do. But it's a meaty topic.
We need to do like a Patreon exclusive Akira discussion after we've rewatched the movie.
So quick shout out to Terrible Book Club, real quick. Terrible Book Club on their Patreon, what they do is Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to do that because I would want to have a legit conversation about like how fucking gorgeous that movie is.
Yeah. No, we could do that. Yeah. You remember that. You remind me. Me and you will watch Akira together and we'll have a discussion on it.
Old Tanya's seen it.
No, I doubt she's seen it, but she'd be down to watch it.
I've not seen it.
I don't think she's much for the animes.
But she's seen some of the animes, and this is like a rite of passage for an anime fan.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay, we'll put a pin in this, listeners, because this was very interesting, and I would like to revisit
we'd love send us questions about Cyberpunk stuff, and we'll try and answer them for you. Or just send us...
or if you know more about this shit than we do.
Give us some good Cyberpunk recommendations, especially stuff that's coming out now.
Yeah, I've been looking at...
Cyberpunk. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I'm... Because, like...
I'm trying to get into the sci-fi field of current writing right now to begin with.
Yeah.
And I bought that Mary Robinette Kowal book. Yeah. I bought this other book that I can't tell you the name of right now because... for reasons... It's on buy or sell the next time I do it. Gotcha. I can't remember.
All right.
But, yeah...
Cool. Yeah. No. I'll start trying to gear more towards reading some sci-fi as well
going forward for a little while, anyways. Because I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
I'll steer into your curve.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, in the coming week, remember to send good vibes to creative consultant Tanya, and may the blessing of the beard be upon you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Books, Beards, Booze. Our co-hosts are Bob, Derek, and Tanya. Our producer is Bob. For more information, visit our website, booksbeardsbooze.com. Follow our social media at Tales by Bob. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share. Okay, bye.